It was a day of paralysis in Kenya's public transport sector as the Michuki rules came into effect for the second time in 15 years. Transport and security authorities have promised a crackdown on traffic rule violations and broadly restoration of sanity in the country's often chaotic, corrupt and ungovernable public transport sector. Matatu owners responded not by complying, but by withdrawing their vehicles from the roads. As a result, thousands of commuters were inconvenienced today, some having to walk to work, and others, we understand, choosing to stay home. The day's events and the broader issues around the public transport sector are the subject of the Citizen TV Monday Special Edition, Town Hall Edition. Good evening from the Daystar University Nairobi campus. My name is Linus Kaikai. And together with my colleague Mashirima Kapombe, we shall be engaging this panel behind me and the audience as well, which, as Mashirima will tell us, is very, very diverse, Mashirima.
Naam, Linus, ni watu tofauti tofauti, wadau tofauti tofauti ambao wamejumuika katika ukumbi huu. Katika chuo kikuu cha Daystar kuna wahudumu wa matatu ambao ni madereva, kuna makondakta, kuna pia wale ambao wanafahamika kama gera, pia kuna waendeshaji taxi, wale wa kawaida na pia wale wa mtandaoni, kuna wanabodaboda na pia kuna wenyekiti wa vyama vya ushirika masako ukipenda ambao wamejumuika hapa. Lakini pia nitakujuza kuwa kuna wengine ambao ndio wasafiri ambao wanahisi kuwa ni wao wameumia zaidi na watakuwa wanauliza maswali yao kwa wale ambao uko nao hapo, Linus.
Thank you Mashirima, and indeed it's a very diverse audience that brings together all the stakeholders in the public sector. And let me now introduce the panel that will help us have this conversation tonight. Starting from my extreme right, that is Charles Owino, who is the police spokesman. Charles. Next to him is the chairman of the Matatu Owners Association, Mr. Simon Kimutai. We also do have the chairperson of the Boda Association, Mr. Kenneth Onyango. And finally, we do have Edwins Mukabana, who is the chairperson of the Federation of Public Transport Operators. And gentlemen, we'll go straight to the issues of the day. And it just happens that this was a very, very difficult day for the commuters. And I want to start with you, Edwins Mukabana, who is the chairperson of the Federation of Public Transport Operators. Why punish the commuter for a grievance that you have against the Ministry of Transport or the Ministry of Interior or indeed the NTSA? Why punish the commuters?
Thank you and good evening, viewers. It was not our intention to cause any grievance to any passengers. You realize that those passengers are the ones that give us bread and butter. And therefore, we did offer an apology to say that indeed it's regrettable that we had to go to those lengths. But why we were forced to do that is because we lacked dialogue. We wanted to understand certain aspects of the regulations, which we thought had been introduced, but were not clear. Especially the Michuki rules were introduced 10 years ago.
But the dialogue you are seeking was with the authorities, the Transport Ministry and possibly Interior. Again, how does the commuter become the victim, Edwins?
Yeah, the issue here was we were not getting audience. And we had asked that audience that we were not given. But we are glad today we were given the audience. And we aired our grievances, and they have been taken into account. And we narrated one by one. And we are very happy that even a task force has been provided and a channel of frequent negotiations has been started.
Let's just hear from the chairperson of the MOA, Matatu Owners Association, which is also a member of the Federation.
Yes, thank you very much, Linus. Good evening, viewers and audience tonight. As Mukabana has mentioned, it's regrettable that this had to happen, but it was the only way that we would get ears from those in authority. There were aspects that we could not understand because it looked like there were introduction of regulations that would have pinned us down as investors as opposed to what was there before, that I would be arraigned in court where a driver has caused an offense. So we were seeking clarification on this.
But Simon, these are not new regulations exactly. They were first introduced 15 years ago. And all the Ministry of Transport and the Ministry of Interior and the Police Department and the NTSA did today was to say, let's go back to those rules. They have been in the books all these years.
There were certain areas, green areas, that needed explanation. And we had sought for audience earlier on to really understand what this meant. If a driver, for instance, decides to change a route and get anywhere else apart from where it's designated, how would I be liable for the same? If a mad driver decides to take a car, he would probably has been going to Kawangware, then he decides to go to Kangemi, then I'm arraigned in court. And this did not make sense at all, and it's not provided. I think it's the way these things were communicated. Otherwise, in compliance, we were in agreement that we needed to comply with the law, but there were certain green areas that we needed explanation.
You talk of mad drivers, and we will shortly talk about the behavior or the culture that we find in the matatu sector. Let me just bring in Charles Owino, because you stand accused by the first two statements here about the dialogue that the matatu owners, the matatu stakeholders have been seeking with the Transport Ministry, with the Police Department. Is that accurate, that they have not been getting the kind of audience that they are looking for?
I'm not aware of any communication between the matatu industry and the Police Department for any dialogue. Equally, I'm not aware of any other regulations that were grey, that were new, apart from the regulations that had been there before. For example, Kimutai has just said that they were to be charged, owners of matatus, if the drivers changed route. I don't know where that regulation is written, or I don't know whether we created a new regulation that I'm not aware of. Otherwise, I believe that these are regulations that have been in existence and that they were given a notice so that at least people would comply with these regulations. Yes.
Right. Your take, Kenneth Onyango, what kind of a day did you as the Boda Boda people have? Were you affected by these regulations?
Per se, first of all, good evening, viewers and the audience here. Thank you, Linus. We were not very much affected as such, because ours was actually to help the normal wananchi actually to reach at the point of work at their workstation, because maybe some of the employers were waiting for them, maybe for a sack for failing to show up, and therefore we advised our members to come in and fill the gap that the matatu operators had decided to defy, maybe not to take passengers to wherever they're supposed to be taken. So our members just played the very crucial role of making sure that the wheels of making the economy move forward continue where the matatu guys had left it.
Sounds like you had a good day as Boda Boda operators.
Not really, but not bad at per se.
Right. And I'll just come to Simon and Mukabana in a moment. But let's first of all listen to the resolve that the Interior Cabinet Secretary, Fred Matiang'i, demonstrated today. Let's listen to what he had to say about these regulations.
Some of those vehicles that are doubling the fares on their routes will lose their licenses today, I can assure them.
Simon Kimutai, a lot of resolve from government, a lot of resolve from the minister or the cabinet secretary in charge of interior.
Well, I think there's too much of thumb testing. This is a business, a legitimate business. When today market forces dictate prices, when you go to a market and potatoes have had their prices normal, when there is less potatoes in the market, you'll find that even one day will cost triple. I don't know why there can be, any difference from this market. If there were few who had complied and went on the road, and due to an equilibrium forces of, demand and supply, what happens? It's natural, but it'll still come to settle. It doesn't mean that they'll be there permanently. This happens in airlines, in any other position. You'll find that during peak time.
But Mr. Kimutai, they play by rules. They're governed by regulations, and all the CS is saying there is follow the law.
What law is there on fares? Do we have a law on fares? We don't have anywhere where we have control on fares. It's actually fares are set by the operators. So when there is too much demand, even Christmas time, that's how businesses are done.
Now that you're saying there are no laws or regulations around fare, just justify to us here, explain to us why the fares, for example, went up today. What justification do you give?
I was just giving you, citing an example when there is too much demand for a service and less provision of the same. The fares are bound to go up. It's just natural. What I would probably engage mostly is what is our maximum. It should not be exploitive, but it's supposed to be meaningful.
But this demand was not created by the passengers. You created it.
We never created it. It was created by, regulations. And in any case, today, because we are talking about demand and supply. When there is little demand, definitely you'll see fares going completely down.
Yeah, and we have commuters in the room, and I want to go to Mashirima right away so that you hear from the commuters themselves. There are passengers in the room. If we can hear from them about two issues that Mr. Kimutai has raised. One is about the issue of fare, and of course, the issue of compliance to the rules. Mashirima.
Naam, Linus, kuna maswali mengi hapa haswa kuhusiana na jinsi matatu zinavyosimamiwa. Kendi Mugambe, uliza swali lako.
My name is Kendi Mugambi, and naongea kwa niaba ya managers was the matatus. Swali langu ni nalidirect to the panel. Ningetaka kuuliza kuna matatu ambazo zina majina tofauti. Kwa mfano tumeona kuna matatu ambazo zimewekwa picha za pengine wanariadha, wanaspoti na zikapewa majina tofauti. Ningetaka kuuliza mbona hizo matatu zimeambiwa zitolewe picha na majina, ili hali tunajua zimewasaidia watu wengi kwa jumla. Mfano mtu akiwa amesafiri kisha aache mizigo yake kwenye gari, anaweza, kwa sababu the number plate is not easy to scram or see, kwa hivyo anaweza kusema jina la gari ama kusema picha ambayo iko kwenye gari. Inatusaidia kudifferentiate the many matatus that are there. Kwa hivyo kama matatu zingewekwa kala moja, it will be definitely, itakuwa very hard for the mwenye ambaye ameacha mizigo yake kwenye gari. Kwa hivyo ningetaka kuuliza majina na picha, that is graffiti in general, ina affect wapi the Ministry of Transport?
Matthew Mwenda pia alikuwa na swali lingine kuhusiana na hizi sheria ambazo yeye anahisi zilikuwa zipo lakini ni kama zimeshtukiza hivi sasa.
Thank you. My name is Matthew Mwenda. I'm a student from Kenyatta University. My question is, now that we have seen this hiking of fares and the crackdown on the matatus, how is this meant to benefit the normal mwananchi? Because our lives now have become, if it was miserable, now it's more miserable because of these prices. Thank you.
Thank you.
LK.
Asante Mashirima. Simon, the second gentleman who asked the question there is saying it's just unbearable. The fares are unbearable.
What I would want to just assure him is that as from tomorrow, I think fares will have normalized. And it wasn't an intention of any person, but I was just trying to describe the market forces. But otherwise, personally, I feel for every other person who is feeling it. And this happens in most markets. And whether there is provision of services or goods, it happens. But it's so unfortunate that it had to happen, especially this time when the economy is not very good. So I just want to assure those who are using the services that as from tomorrow now, it's fares which they normally use.
They'll go down from tomorrow.
They will definitely go down because we're going to have maybe about 70% of our vehicles back on the road.
I'll come to you, Charles, on this issue of fares and what sounded to me like a directive from the Cabinet Secretary about those who change the prices of fare. But let me go to Edwins first to see whether you agree with Simon on the issue of pricing. Where do you draw the line between a free market and exploitation?
Up to 1991, before the structural adjustments, fares in this country were regulated. And the TLB regulated the fares for both town and long distance. When 1991 came, when the liberalization of the market came, price controls were removed not only on transport, but on all other goods. Those who remember those days, we could take beer at Serena at the same price as everywhere else. So prices started changing. In a transport economy, prices are regulated. And where prices are regulated...
Let me interrupt you because you've given an example of having a drink in a pub. The one thing I can assure you is the prices in that pub will not change just because it's raining outside.
I am aware that prices will change if the supply of that beer or that particular product reduces. It is market forces, that's what I was trying to put in. But in transport, there is a regulation on prices, and prices comes because of a subsidy. What happens is that the government comes in and says you will cap this price at this level. And where the government is putting a price level, then it says that if you spend more, we will subsidize. In this country, there's no subsidy, and we are all using the same product.
So let me bring you back to today's events.
Yes.
Do you say, Edwins, that it was justified for matatus, those that were on the road today, to increase prices by even over 100%?
No, over 100%, definitely that was not acceptable, and we will talk to our members about it. But what I just wanted to mention is that I think it is a bit unfair to the transport industry, and we know that we deal with sometimes the lowest, the lower people who are affected, and it becomes very difficult. But certainly there was a possibility of prices increasing, which is regrettable, but I think from tomorrow things will be okay.
Right, Charles, the issue of prices, you had this Cabinet Secretary talking of vehicles that could actually lose registration because of increasing prices.
First of all, it's interesting to hear people talk about the forces of demand and supply and points of equilibrium. This is the highest level of immorality that you can talk about in a society, because you don't hoard goods and then say that the supply is less. It's criminal to hoard goods. What they did was simply like hoarding to ensure that people suffer and then compel or circumvent people to maybe discuss some of these issues. So I can say fares, increasing fares in this circumstance was not justifiable in any way. The minister is simply right. It's not an absolute right to be licensed to carry people. If you decide to become immoral in the mode in which you are carrying out your business, then you cannot complain when your license is taken away. Yes.
Edwins, is this, as Charles Owino is saying, an ethical question?
But it's a business question in so far as we are concerned. It could be ethical if the fares are increased unreasonably, like in some cases I do accept they were increased threefold or fourfold, which was unscrupulous for some certain members. But we did not hoard any fares, any services to people. What happened is that we were required to comply, and like anybody who is operating a private sector business, if somebody was operating a hotel, and I just am using this for illustration, and for whatever reason he feels maybe I will shut my shop, because if I take my vehicle out, the fines or the things I'm likely to get are likely to exceed my input. Then you are likely to be cautious. We take risks to put vehicles on the road, and we must mitigate that risk.
So are you saying you increase the fares to raise fines?
No. I'm saying totally different. I'm saying that we do not withhold or hoard services. I'm simply saying is that we were mitigating risk. For example, if you take your vehicle on the road and it is impounded, and the fine that comes out is very expensive, more than the cost of doing business on that particular day, do you do that business that day, or do you take...
Interrupt.
Yes, Charles.
You know, the reason why we are not doing very well as a country is when older people become dishonest. It becomes very unfair. They have just said that they had called upon matatu owners to go on strike. I'm now getting a different explanation, because they said initially that they wanted to be listened to get an ear. And now I'm hearing that they did not take their vehicles to the road because they feared the implications. But many people took their vehicles to the road, and those who had complied, there was no problem with them. So it's just fair for us to be honest. And when we talk about equivalence to hoarding, it's because you have simply refused to take your vehicle to the road so that you can compel, or you can, because people knew very well that we had examinations going on. So you wanted government to be paralyzed, people to be paralyzed, and they cry over, which is not appropriate. And that's why I call it is immoral by standards, any standards. It's immoral and it is not justifiable in any way.
I see Simon is angling to respond to you.
I want to correct Charles here. There was no strike at all. Strike has a process and has procedures. So I just want to tell Charles there was no strike at all. And Mukabana has explained in depth what really happened. A society will always suffer when all players do not talk to each other.
You're saying there is no strike, yet
there was no strike. It's not a strike.
He pulled out the vehicles from the roads this morning.
I think we should be able to differentiate by placing your equipments on a side and procedurally declaring a strike. There are two different issues here. So here was no strike because there is a procedure for a strike to take place. What I just want to say is that when authority doesn't want to listen to stakeholders in certain areas, then it's the local mwananchi who suffers. Because what happens is, you could hear that somebody had been arrested and 100,000 shillings had been meted on him as fine. So what happens? The people who live in fear, what they'll do is to place their equipments aside to understand. So it took us less than 2 hours to be able to resolve this. And I don't know what was difficult initially to allow us audience. So you see, it's not only matatu owners who have made people suffer. The authority has done so by refusing to listen to stakeholders. And you should know that this is private business. And when it's private business, where there are no subsidies, then private sector will always play its cards right in terms of doing business. If you come on the road and you're thrown into, your vehicle is impounded, then you're not bound by anything to bring that vehicle out. So I think what needs to happen is stakeholders, the authority, especially in internal security, we need to play ball and score in one area, not to play volleyball all the time.
Linus, I don't understand where this issue of subsidy is coming from. Because what we've been talking about is our mode of doing business, the bad behavior on the roads, or overspeeding, not having seat belts, just for purposes of safety. And so I don't know where this argument of subsidy is coming from. It's the bad practices that all of us agree that we are not doing very well. Even from my side, just a minute, even from my side as a police department, I would admit that we take bribes. So it's important that we admit our mistake as a nation and look at the problem in its holistic nature and say, this is the best way, this is how we need to practice, this is how we need to move forward as a country. But if we keep defending bad behavior and things that we know are obviously bad, then I think the issue of immorality still comes back and it haunts us as a country.
And indeed, just hold on, Simon, and hold on, Charles, because that will be the next topic. We are going to discuss the regulations proper vis-a-vis the behavior of the and what we call the matatu culture. But I still want to go to the audience because we do have commuters. These are passengers, people who are actually neither matatu owners but just ordinary commuters who use these vehicles on a day-to-day basis? And to Kimutai, the question would be a very simple one of how do you decide there are different fares at different hours for these commuters? Peak hour and what you call regular hours are different. Is this part of the free market forces that you're talking about?
Well, you see, in business doing and transport, there is peak hour where the demand is very high, and there is off-peak hour. This is not only practiced in Kenya. The practice all over the world. Even if you want to catch a plane during, holidays, if you want to, there are times when you want to get a plane to travel outside the country, you'll find different fares. There are times it's peak season, and when peak season is there, you'll find that you'll pay more.
Season, not hour.
No, I'm talking about season. We can translate it. We can translate it down and put it in a way that it can be hourly and it can be a season. They are all. What happens is at the end of the day is that it's fair pay.
I'm sure you're aware, Mr. Kimutai, that fares can change mid-trip in a Kenyan matatu.
I understand. Well, I don't know that. What I would say is that you've not raised a question when passengers are even given a ride using 10 shillings.
That's rare. That's very rare.
Linus,
excuse me. No. Mashirima with the passengers.
Just a minute. I'll forget. Just a minute. I'll forget. You know,
allow me to respond.
You cannot compare fares of a matatu and fares of an aeroplane. The users of these two items are people of completely different classes. Persons who use aeroplanes. No, not ordinary persons use aeroplanes. For matatus, every person needs a matatu. An aeroplane, you can choose to use an aeroplane to Mombasa today. But if you don't have money, you can choose to use a train or a matatu. So when we talk about class, it's like, for example, when you want to eat, you have a choice. You can eat in a 5-star hotel, and the cost will differ. You can decide to eat in a kiosk. So what happens is, I still go back to itemizing issues.
Right.
You cannot compare the pricing of an aeroplane and the pricing of a matatu because they are used by different classes of people.
Hold on, Simon and Edwins. You'll respond to this.
Yes.
As soon as we take the question from a commuter to a commuter, Mashirima.
LK, kuna swali kutoka kwa msafiri, lakini kuna wale ambao wanahisi kuwa wamepata hasira kidogo kuhusiana na hiyo kauli kuwa huwezi kufananisha nauli ya ndege na nauli ya matatu. Labda Gibson unaweza kuuliza swali lako.
Okay, I'm Gibson and I would like to I'm Gibson and this thing about the plane and the matatu. These things operate differently. Matatu is always working. The plane goes, comes back, they have to wait, right? Yeah. Plus, these people who are traveling are not of the same class. Yeah, it's not the same class.
Are you a commuter?
I'm a commuter and a conductor. At times, I use matatu.
Okay.
At times, I'm at the door charging them.
Thank you. You've made your point. Let's listen to a commuter, somebody who actually pays bus fare.
Okay, kuna mwingine hapa. Sema jina lako alafu utuambie swali lako ni lipi.
Bazenge Arnold. I'm a student at Daystar. If you listen from the chairman of the matatus, you can see how the industry is crazy. It's because their leaders, they are uncouth, forgive me for using that, and they cannot even regulate their own industry. Because there is no way, like for example today, distance where they usually charge 70, they were charging 300. What measure or how can you quantify that kind of fare? So what it shows here is these guys don't care about the normal consumer. Nobody is there, neither the government nor the matatu. What they are there is for business. So that means the matatu circles are they're taking advantage of the lacuna in law that does not regulate matatus, the prices. So for me, I would really say that the government need to come up with a law that regulates them.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Edwin, You're taking advantage. He says you're taking advantage of the commuters.
I think it's very unfair, just like my colleague was trying to explain. When you board a vehicle very early in the morning, and I know we all go sometimes very early in the morning, you pay as little as 20 bob every day. Those who come from Thika pay even as little as 10 bob. There's no complaint at that time. Fares are defined differently. We have counterflow fare, peak-off-peak fares, we have got graduated fares, we have got flat fares. So it depends on what kind of fare a city decides to have, depending on what type of operation they take. Let's take, for example, the digital taxi. Do they have depressions and increases? They do. Nobody asks about that. They do this today. They operated very well. Did they charge the same fares? No. But when it comes that we decide, and I think I would like to take exception that people who have invested over 50 billion in an industry, and we go ahead and start saying that they are uncouth, that they are immoral. I think to call a whole industry immoral, I think is not fair. Because we have invested money. And this is what happens in this industry, Linus. If you build a hotel worth 140 million, you are respected. If you buy 20 matatus worth 140 million, nobody sees you as an investor. I think it's high time we started looking at the industry as an investment. Yes, there are problems. But when these problems developed, were police on leave? From the time of Michuki, did they go and leave? So who was the problem?
I think, thank you very much. I think Mukabana has put it straight. There is no time when the law on safety was suspended. Instead, what happened? The policemen turned the same law into benefit.
Sorry, Simon, we are still on the issue of...
yeah, I'm just trying to say...
Let him vent.
We
will answer him.
We'll come to the regulations shortly. So address yourself to the question raised on the
issues of fares.
Yes.
We've said, and I gave an example, that any time when there is limited supply of any commodity, and I took an example of waru. When there is limited supply, you can purchase a debe for even 400-500 shillings, isn't it? Now, when there is big supply, you can buy it for as little as 80 shillings. This happens. It's there. And this is defined by the market forces. Just a moment.
Interrupt you
just a moment.
I'll interrupt you in your own word, Mr. Kimutai, because just a few days ago, in our documentary called The Gangster Circle, you spoke of the terror that you as matatu owners live in because the sector is controlled by goons. Do you even, as matatu owners, actually know when they are changing their prices on the road?
Let me say this. You know, every organization, when a government takes over, they swear that they are going to protect you plus your properties and businesses. When you don't get this protection, and these loose gangsters are all over, you know, this is a business done on trust, that you give out...
Let me simplify it, Mr. Kimutai. A matatu on the road from CBD to Jogoo Road, for example, and midstream, a conductor decides to increase fare by another 20 shillings. Are you, as the owner, aware of that?
Well, you know, one thing is that there are allegations that could not be proved.
These are practices.
No, you don't use matatu, so you cannot say anything. These people are the ones who... So I just want to put it very clearly that let's be very practical. It's not a hearsay. It should be something that had been witnessed.
By the way, as journalists, we use all form of transports, including donkeys, Mr. Kimutai. So let's go to Kenneth first, and then we'll continue. Yes.
Linus, I think the problem that we are experiencing right now in this country is a failure to exercise the law consistently. Because you actually see even in the ministry, maybe Ministry of Transport or the Ministry of Interior. For instance, today, Bwana Matiang'i is changed from that ministry. Another minister comes to that ministry who is not a no-nonsense minister. Then you'll actually see that the practice of ensuring that Michuki laws are actually exercised to the fullest, they slow down on it.
We'll come to the
and
regulations.
Actually that
we'll
one,
come to the regulations, Kenneth.
Yes.
Do you have any issue to raise with the matter that has been in discussion on the issue of fares?
The issue of fares, actually what happened like today, for us as boda operators, we were actually not happy about the increase of fares because number one, when they increased fares, most of the operators or the commuters decided maybe to use the Uber guys who decided also to go offline just to carry passengers out of the other means. And let me tell you, at the end of the day, we actually realized that the business, even on the side of boda, was not actually good because by holding or maybe keeping their buses or matatus away from the roads, our business as a boda operators is very much interdependent with the matatu because you drop 50 passengers here, we pick our passengers. And now by increasing fares and making sure those vehicles are not on the road, it's something that I will actually concur with Mr. Charles. That was very, very moral.
Linus, give me a right to reply.
Gentlemen and ladies in the room.
Now, I've been attacked badly.
Charles, you'll get an opportunity to respond. When we come back, we'll be discussing governance and compliance as well as the matatu culture. You're watching the Citizen Town Hall edition coming to you live from the Daystar University here in Nairobi. We're taking a short commercial break. We'll be back shortly.